Welcome back, everyone. I hope you grabbed a sandwich or some Smarties, seeing as we had Stefan from Nestle on earlier, and are fully caffeinated. So now I'd like to welcome Joe Pybus from Essity to our virtual stage. Joe has worked in the paper and tissue industry for nearly 20 years, with roles spanning across operations through to retail brand management. More recently, she has held roles in technical product development and environmentally regulatory compliance. She's currently Sustainability and Public Affairs Manager for Essity in the UK and Ireland, and I'm stealing her words here when I say she's loving it. Her presentation today is centred on telling your sustainability story. I'm really looking forward to hearing her insights on the challenges, complexities, and opportunities that come with working to deliver and communicate sustainable impact. Remember, you can submit your questions in the chat on the right. So over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. There's a reason I've put sort of a bookshop of books behind the screen there, because what really enthused me about this subject was the idea of sustainability as a story. Clearly, it's not a work of fiction, and clearly what you have to be telling has to be the truth and verifiable and having an impact. But actually how you package that is really important. There's so many books of stories out there of different sizes, different shapes, different colours. And how do you make someone want to pick up your book, open the cover, and even then keep on turning the pages? And that was what I wanted to explore today. I decided not to take a focus on textbooks, and by textbooks I mean the corporate reports that companies have to do, your annual reports, the sort of regulatory sustainability reports that are required, because that's not the area that I work in, and I don't deal with those stakeholders. I was much more interested in exploring how we communicate with the other stakeholders, the people who maybe just pick up your product in a shop or use it in a restaurant or an office, and how you can communicate what you're doing to them. Obviously, I do use the information that's in our more corporate reporting, but you pick and choose that, and you choose it for the right circumstances. Not everyone's going to be interested. And when I was starting to think about how to deliver this presentation, I had a chat with my kids over breakfast one day, and my children are 12 and 14, and I asked them what they know about the environment and sustainability and what it means to them. And they came out with words like deforestation, single-use plastic, climate change, all very big, very frightening in a way, words that really set the setting for the scene of everybody's stories today. And that made me think back to when I was their kind of age and what I knew about sustainability and the environment. And I remember putting caterpillars in margarine tubs and poking holes in the top and trying to feed them and turn them into ideally beautiful butterflies, but more often than not, fairly grim flies from memory. I remember going and having mushrooms from the forest that you'd print and make mushroom prints on paper, and drying flowers with those presses that you'd tighten with little wing nuts on the top. So my perception of sustainability growing up was so different from the kids. It was very, very localized, very sort of positive in a way, and a very much different place from what we see today. And the reason for me talking to the kids and thinking about when they were what I was doing when I was their age was that that was around the time when sustainability really edged into global consciousness as something that we talked about. It was when there was the first real definition of sustainability and sustainable development that came from something that's known as the Brundtland Report, and has sort of paved the way for how sustainability is defined today. And I think maybe from that point on, it became quite a sciencey, confusing topic for people, and complicated, and it can be complicated. And one of the things we've got to do in our stories is make it simple. So bear with me. I've taken the theme of a book for this because I quite like the idea of how you can fit your sustainability story into how you think about writing a book. And another thing that we used to do with the kids when they were at primary schools, you'd always pick up a book and you'd have a look at the front and the back cover and you'd read what they call the blurb on the back of the book. What does it tell you about what's inside? And the thing that really struck me about sustainability stories was you have to have a story to tell in the first place. And that's from two perspectives. You've got to have a story to tell, because actually, if you don't in the future, you're unlikely to have a business. But you also have to have a story to tell because you've got to be authentic in what you're doing, and you've got to have a purpose. And many businesses, we're not in business to be sustainable. We're a business that exists because it is sustainable. And there's a subtle difference there. And I think you need to make sure that your values as a business align with your core purpose and your core being, and where you have a real responsibility and a real expertise to play in the sustainability arena. You can't be an expert in everything, so you have to pick the ones where you can have real credibility and really lead to have an impactful story. So from an Essity perspective, and I'm here today with a Talk hat on, but Talk is part of a wider business, and we're a leading global hygiene and health company, and we're all about improving people's well-being through hygiene and through health solutions. And we've got to have a story that will make sense for someone buying Cushell in a supermarket, or Tenor or Bodyform, to someone using Leukoplast, which is one of our medical ranges, to someone using Talk in a business. So it's really got to be something that puts a red thread through everything that you do and makes sense to people. So when people see it, it joins the dots up. And so we work with 3 themes on sustainability. I've picked the Talk version of it here, but it exists at a corporate level. So we've talked about how important well-being is to us as a business, and breaking barriers to well-being is really our core purpose as a business. And from a Talk perspective, it's all about raising hygiene standards for everybody and improving well-being in the workplace. And then we have 2 other pillars that are more environmental in focus. We talk about circularity. We are a large user of fresh and recycled fibre. And that's somewhere where we have a real responsibility in terms of how we operate, for example. And then the 3rd pillar is all about being more from less. So how can we make sure that a lot of our products are single use and disposable? How do we make those, we manage dispensing so that we manage use. We design them to need less material so there's less waste at the end. So those are the 3 key pillars that we'll operate to. Continuing with my book theme, I hope it's making sense to you. The plot and the action's really important in any story. And sustainability stories are really quite interesting because the ending's not a surprise, and I'll come on to why I say that in a minute. But it's a story where you still want your readers to keep turning those pages. So how do you do that? Oh, that went backwards. And the ending isn't a surprise because most companies have targets. You know, the person on the street might not necessarily know what your targets are, but you've got targets that sit there. We have targets. We've got a net zero target under our science-based target. We've got targets for delivering innovations. We've got targets around the packaging and the fibres that we source and product waste. And then we've a whole host of targets under well-being, which is where we also include business ethics, human rights, all the sort of responsibility sides of things. So you've kind of told people where you're heading. You've told people what your mission is and where you're heading. But actually what's important in telling a sustainability story is your actions. I think there's been a lot said in stories about targets and about commitments. And actually it's what people see as actions that will be really convincing, because anybody can talk about targets, but not everybody can talk about what they're doing to achieve them. So actually your big book of sustainability story is very often split into lots of different stories, and some people will be more interested in one story than another, and some people may dip in and out and see what you're doing across several of the stories that you're creating. And I've just put a few examples here that kind of hopefully show how our sustainability stories ladder very much back up into the 3 themes that we talked about. So in the top there, we've got a picture of a wheat field. and wheat straw. About half of the world's wheat straw goes to waste. And we've invested in a site in Mannheim to be able to turn that waste wheat straw into pulp that can be used in our products as an alternative fibre. And we've got the responsibility to play there because we're such a big user of both fresh and recycled pulp. And that very much fits under the circularity theme. The other picture at the top there is a picture of our mill at Lillaredet in Sweden, where we've been doing some extensive trials using biogas to remove the carbon emissions from the site. And again, from a technical perspective, the paper industry is a heavy industry, and decarbonisation is a challenge. On the far side of the slide, I touched on it this morning for those of you who were there, but in our intimate hygiene brands, we're moving away from those disposable single-use products and offering an alternative to consumers in terms of washable underwear across the Bodyform and Tenor brands. Again, a circular innovation. And at the bottom, we talked a lot about well-being, and that's well-being of the planet and of people. And there's a number of reports and things that we've done there that to encourage that. We've recently issued one on Check for Change, which is all about people not going to their doctors through COVID, and how we're trying to encourage that to happen. And then there's work we've done around the green recovery and understanding the impacts of COVID on consumers' attitudes to the environment. I've got a little bit more on that later, but we've recently repeated that, and we'll be publishing the results soon. And then the final one there is a new initiative called Talk Paper Circle that intrigued me to use as an example for telling your story today, because it's a bit different about many of the things that we do, in that it's a new service rather than a new product that we're offering. So Talk Paper Circle is a service that we're just in the process of launching in the UK, but we've launched in other countries across Europe. And it's the world's first recycling service for paper hand towels. Obviously we supply many businesses with paper hand towels, and historically they've been difficult to recycle. In fact, I think less than 1% of the world's paper towels are recycled because they contain something called wet strength agent. Basically, you don't want the hand towel to fall apart when you're drying your hands, and that makes it difficult to recycle them. But as technology's progressed, it's given us the ability to be able to take those in a known quantity and segregate it and be able to recycle them at paper mills, which means that fibre can be used again. So it's turning a previously disposable product into something that can be reused, and it's helping answer many businesses' needs to reduce their waste and become more circular. So it's an example of where your sustainability story can help other people, and that's something that you really need to tap into and understand what you are doing for your readers. And this one intrigued me because it's got a lot of different stakeholders throughout it. So it's the business that you're talking to and is engaged with us and partnering with us, supplying the service. You've got the visitors to the business and the employees that are using the washrooms. You've got the cleaners who have to empty the containers, and then the businesses that take those paper towels and bring them back to us to recycle. So there's a lot of people that need to be engaged in that happening. And that was why I like this as an example. And that brings me on to talking about our readers, because your readers are in many ways the most important people in your story for a number of reasons. And you've got to think about the way you're telling the story in relation to your readers. I've put a few questions there of things that occurred to me when I was thinking about it. So do they actually think sustainability is what you think it is a really important question for you to think about. And also, what's in it for them? What do they get out of it? Why should they engage and keep on turning those pages of your book? And possibly the most important thing here is, do you actually need them to be part of your story? Are you going to need to ask them to change their behaviour for you to be able to deliver what you need to do? So just want to explore those issues a little bit further. So two graphs on here. One on the right with the sort of word cloud was I'd asked a colleague just to send out a Viper survey, just saying to people, what if someone says sustainability to you, what do you think they mean? And these were all the words that came back. Clearly environment came through the most, but there's a whole host of other words there that people came up with when they were talking about sustainability. And I've certainly found that when I've been doing some internal training courses, and you start it off with, what does sustainability mean to you? And everybody will have a different answer, which makes it really hard for you to pinpoint what you talk to your readers about. On the right is a chart that came out of some research that Talk did into understanding how their customers interpreted sustainability. And what they found is now, with time, people are talking about sustainability as covering social value, economic needs, and the environment. It's very much broadened beyond sustainability being about the environment, which was in many ways was people's perception of where it started off. So I think that your story needs to think about, even if you're not going to lead the way and do something revolutionary in these areas, what do you do? Because someone that you're telling your story to, that will be their most interesting point. And I'm enjoying my book theme here, and got a little bit of carried away with Harry Potter images here, but this was just to illustrate the point that I raised earlier about people not necessarily wanting to hear the story in the same way. You will get the people who want to read your reference books and read your textbooks. And I had a conversation with someone the other day, and they were saying, where can I go and find the sustainability report? I want to read it, and I want to understand your carbon emissions in more detail. And that's more likely to be the sort of more technically people like me who have sustainability in their job title. But many other people will not necessarily want to know that information, but will want to get a flavour of what you're like from the way you talk to them and you tell them the story. And I've picked 3 different ways of talking about Harry Potter here to illustrate the point. The one in the middle is the book that I had a copy of with the kids version of the cover, and I was quite happy to read that, and that wasn't an issue. But I do remember vaguely from when those books came out, pictures of people on the tube, and adults didn't want the kids version of the book. They wanted the grown-up version of the book with a serious train on the front, heading to Hogwarts. But then you might get people who just want a visual impression and who just want to see the film. So you've got to think about your audience in the way that you tell the story and the level of information that you provide to them. You've also got to think about whether or not you need them to be part of the story. And the reason I've said this is so important, and we'll come back to it on Talk Paper Circle, is that actually sometimes you need people's behaviour to change. And you need to think about how you're going to go ahead and do that, because Talk Paper Circle, for example, won't be successful if people don't put the hand towels in the right bin, and if the cleaner doesn't collect the towels and go and take them to the right place. So sometimes you need people to be part of that game for you to deliver what you need to achieve, and you need to make them feel good and feel that they're doing their part by doing that. So an example here, just quickly, of the sort of the business end of Talk Paper Circle, and not something that will necessarily engage the person who's putting the hand towel in the bin, but might encourage the business owner to opt to it, is where you look at the key points and the key things it will bring for them, and look at it from their perspective. This isn't about us going and saying we're going to achieve this by introducing this new innovation. It's about what they're going to achieve by introducing this new innovation. And it's in terms of waste, and it's in terms of carbon footprint predominantly here, and what people can deliver from their own objectives. And we'll come back to authenticity and credibility later, and you can probably see on the slide at the bottom there's lots of tiny little writing, and the substantiation of numbers and things that you put out there is becoming increasingly important. I'll mention it now and probably again at the end, but the CMA have obviously just produced their new guidance on Green Claims Code, and being able to substantiate what you're saying. This isn't a Harry Potter story, is going to become increasingly important for everybody to do. And we've worked with this initiative on ways of making it really clear what's actually in it for your reader. For Talk Paper Circle, footprints, a carbon footprint calculator has been generated to see what the actual benefit for someone's workplace can be. So you can see very quickly why it's a good initiative to engage with, and it just makes it really simple. and it's not using complicated language. I know last week I did an induction with someone and was taking them through sustainability, and then realised afterwards that I'd been rabbiting on about scope 1 and scope 2, and they're probably things that didn't make any sense to them, and it's made me reflect that I need to think about how I talk about some of these things to people in the future. You've got readers, but you've also got the people that tell that story to those readers, and you've got to think about who they are, and how they tell that story, because it's not always going to be one person that's delivering it. And actually, I think in many ways your employees are your biggest storytellers. If you can come up with a way that makes sustainability simple, easy to understand, and really delivers what walks the talk for what you say you're doing, and your employees see that, then they're the ones that are going to go out and tell everybody that you're doing it. And they're the ones that meet people day in, day out, and have those conversations about it. And if you've got them on side, then you're a long way towards delivering what you need to do. And you get your employees on side through all sorts of means. I mean, I've been running training workshops with a lot of the guys throughout the business. With part of the business, we've just done a whole sustainability and wellbeing week to engage with employees, with getting external speakers in to challenge our perspectives and make us think about what we're doing. There's a whole host of ways that you can engage with your employees. And actually, in some ways, one of the most important ways is the environment that you work in. You know, do you just talk about being sustainable, or does that flow through into the way that your offices are set up, and all those very non-verbal things that actually make a big difference? And that's something that I'm personally quite passionate about delivering. But actually, there's other people that can be your ambassadors as well. And this one I really liked with Talk Paper Circle, because it can be very easy to use the material and the presentations and the numbers and the bullet points and all the things that sort of logically make something sound like a good idea, but there's got to be a human face to it. It's not just about numbers. There's got to be a human face to what you do. And actually, some of your stakeholders can become your ambassadors in the way they talk about it. And I've just got a video that I'd like to share using the cleaner from Talk Paper Circle, who tells about it from her perspective. Now, I've got to put myself on mute to do this so you don't get all sorts of reverb. So please bear with me while I try to get my mouse to put me on mute, and I'll join you again afterwards.
Del planeta går under. Det är bara så. Nu ska vi slänga dem och sen ska vi tvätta. Sen kommer tillbaka och vi kan använda en gång till. Det är fantastiskt. Min pappa när jag var liten, han hade berättat till mig så här. Och jag frågade, pappa, varför är så mycket stjärna? Nej, det är inte just pappa sa. Tänk inte där. Tänk bara på den som du lever. Och den stannar här.
Så att taket flyger upp för oss när vi kör. Vi ska ju återvinna pappret. Vi ska inte sprida ut det. När jag var liten så slängde man allting. Det gick ju i samma påse allting. Så är det ju inte idag. Den är fin.
Jag tror att i andra galaxer, i andra system, det finns planeter, det finns människor. Jag tror på den. Men vi bor här. Då våra vara är här.
Hello again. Hopefully that worked and there was no reverb. So I actually know Gunnar that's in that video. So they were genuinely all the people that are involved in launching Talk Paper Circle in Sweden there. I'd now like to turn to the language, because I think we've mentioned before, this telling a story is about your readers. It's not about you, and it's not about you using and telling it in the way that makes sense to you. And I referenced earlier some work that we'd done looking at the impact that COVID-19 had on people's perceptions of sustainability. And what I've got up on screen now is kind of part of the output of a piece of research that we did, talking to 2,000 people in the UK and 1,000 in Ireland last summer, as we came out of lockdown 1, in terms of what the impact of COVID had been on their attitudes towards sustainability and what the challenges they had in being more sustainable were. And obviously, I'm not going to go into the detail of the little bits and pieces that are on the slide there, but to pull out some of the key points, we found that over half of the respondents that we'd spoken to had tried to become more sustainable since lockdown had come into place, and 8 in 10 of those people said they wanted to continue after lockdown was over. A lot of the reasons that people had for being more sustainable was down to having more time to be so. And it would range from recycling more to using fewer single-use items to, for me personally, food waste was a big thing with all of us at home. So it really told us that actually, far from being in a pit stop and stopping because of the focus on hygiene through COVID, people have become a lot more aware of the world around them and the impact that we had on the planet. However, we also found that people found sustainability a very complicated topic. There was a lot of confusion about the language that's used, and biodegradable, a word that's bandied about a lot, and what does compostable mean? Where can I put it? I don't know what I need to do with things. I don't understand, was a theme that came back through very strongly. And then also people needing to see collaboration. So a good example of where this is going now is by the UK Plastics Pact, for which we're a signatory, where many of the big retailers are now setting up soft plastic recycling areas at the fronts of their store ahead of hopefully curbside collections being introduced in the future, is the common language of what we use for what can go in those bins, because actually that's bigger than a company trying to make their own impression. That's something we need to work on together to make happen and not confuse people. And it's something that made us think about some of the language that we use when we talk about our own sustainability themes. Circularity isn't a word that makes sense to everybody, but reusing or recycling is more likely to make sense to them. So it really makes you think about how you talk and about how using words that make sense to people is really important. This isn't about making it sound scientific and sound confusing. This is about making it really convenient and really easy for people to be sustainable. So back to my Talk Paper Circle example and how it started, because obviously you need to educate the people who are in the toilets to put the hand towels in the bin. And this is an example of where we started with the labels for that, in terms of trying to tell people what they did and didn't need to put into the bins and giving them a message afterwards. And it didn't work. It wasn't entirely successful, and because we need a certain level of purity to be able to make sure that we can recycle the material, and this signage wasn't working for us. And this is now how it's going. This is what's been moved to, and this is what we'll be rolling out across the UK, with simpler messages and different colours and bigger images throughout the washroom journey to encourage people and thank them, because people like responding to a social norm. They like to feel they've done something good that other people will do. And we know that sort of people are very open to the idea of recycling. I mentioned the Green Recovery Report. We've done revisited it this year, and we've not long had the results in, and we'll be publishing the report soon under the Green Response. But there we know that 45% of people think recycling is one of the biggest things that they can do to help the planet. And actually, I thought the signage was really interesting because it's not just the language, it's the visual images for what you use and who's talking about it. And actually, we went to behavioural scientists to try and get this right because it's so important. And I think this really emphasises the fact that when you need people to be part of your journey, you've got to make it as easy as possible for them. And we did a whole host of research with people with signage and working out what was the best for people to do in terms of colour, in terms of language, in terms of image, to map out what was the best way of us trying to get people to put that hand towel in that bin, because that's what we need them to do. And finally, moving to credibility and authenticity, another really important part of the story. I've used lots of images of Harry Potter, but this isn't a fiction story, and what you need to be telling has to be the truth and has to be something that people can believe you with real impact. So it's kind of your references. And very much at my textbook end of the scale, you'll have the sort of the recognitions that you have, and there's many external bodies that will provide a sustainability rating for your business, and it's a really good feel at a corporate level to know how you benchmark against other industries, gaps in what you need to do. It's going to be something that's important in finance and for investors going forwards, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything to anyone below your immediate customers. And even then, some of them may not have heard of this. It's certainly, you know, we've talked about who in the organisation would be interested in some of these. And then you can get an initiative level. So Talk Paper Circle here has had a whole host of awards and recognitions for what we're trying to do, which when you're introducing it into a new market will lend credibility to the fact that it does deliver something and other people have said so. That's kind of really where you're going with it. And can you get customer commentary? And really, I wanted to sort of finish with the idea of standards, honesty, and ambassadors. We've talked about the need for referencing numbers and things that you might look at, but there's lots of third-party standards out there that are a way of giving credibility to what you say is what you do. There's a certain level of honesty, I think, involved in this journey, and we've said that we will be transparent about the things that go well and the things that don't go so well, because you try lots of things and they don't all work, but you are trying them and they often take quite a lot of time. So the picture in the middle is a pilot that we did with Cushell product in paper packaging last year. It was actually it's a heavy product because it was designed to be very environmentally focused, because it's double rolls, so there's fewer cores, but it makes it very heavy. And while all our trials went well internally, at the shelf there was too much damage and too much wastage, and at that point you're not delivering a sustainability benefit. So we revisited and relaunched at the moment in recycled and renewable film. And finally, it's really important to have your ambassadors and your employees and other people, and word of mouth are some of the biggest ambassadors that you can get, but you've got to tell them the story in a way that makes sense to them, using language that makes sense to them, to really deliver that story. And I'd just like to finish by saying thank you, that your sustainability story is part of a much bigger sustainability story and journey that everybody's on, and you want to stand out, but there's the points where you need to collaborate and you need to join in with everybody else. So it's a real balance between picking the things that you can really contribute to, you can really own, you can really deliver, that's part of a much bigger jigsaw. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to that, and I'll hand back to Amy now, if I can get my mouse to work.
Thank you so much, Jo. Brilliant, really brilliant to hear about Essity's sustainability story. And I agree, for businesses to be around in the future, they'll need to be authentic and have that clear purpose. Few questions. So you just spoke there at the end about the importance of collaboration, and that's something that has been referenced throughout today, actually. Can you give an example of where you've collaborated on an initiative or something within Essity where you've seen success?
I think probably the most well-known thing that we collaborate in at the moment's been the signatory to the UK Plastics Pact. You know, we do use packaging. We're not a massive user of packaging, and we're not going to change what happens by ourselves. And so that's an example of where we do need to join up, and we need to work alongside other organisations to deliver change. So be that their access to the design for recyclability guidelines and making sure we follow those, or common education in how people recycle. So we did work on one of our consumer brands with Cushell to try and educate people on what they put in bins at home and how to check. So I think that's a big area where collaboration's needed and where we're trying to get engaged in the UK in that.
Thank you. And I'm going to take your book theme here and run with it, just because you did it so well.
I had fun with it.
So how do you ensure your key stakeholders are on the same page as you and they buy into your sustainability story?
I think a lot of it is about understanding their needs to start with, and seeing where we'll do a lot of work to match understanding what the issues and the challenges are for our stakeholders with what we're trying to do, be that an end consumer or a customer. And you get that through, internet searches, you talk to people, talking's the biggest opportunity you have, through doing things like our green recovery or green response report, as I think it will be called this year, and actually keeping a finger on the pulse and making sure you're continuing to listen. I think listening's one of the biggest things you can do there. It's not all about you telling your story. You've got to listen to what other people have to say. And maybe that's the bit that doesn't come out from a book theme.
Yeah, that story's got to evolve almost.
It's got to evolve, and it's not actually, in the end, it's not actually a story, it's a conversation.
It's not an end, is it? There's no end point. Oh, no, I like that. Something about your presentation that I've heard you speak about before, I find really fascinating, is the study you did on people's attitude to the environment since COVID. And you spoke through with me at one of our single-use plastics groups about how actually the results weren't necessarily what you expected, and people were actually, even in the pandemic, looking to be more sustainable. You just talked through how Essity really simplified the learnings you took from that was to simplify the language you were using and to simplify your story. What initiative, as part of that kind of simplification, do you think was most effective or successful? Was there anything that you did that you really thought, yes, that's actually really helped the message go further?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure we did any specific initiatives. The biggest thing was probably looking at some of the language we use and starting to try and use words that are in the common vernacular, like reduce and recycle and reuse, instead of talking to everyone about circularity. So I think sort of trying to get that level of understanding through. And then I think the other thing it's led to has really been to do workshops and talk to sort of people throughout the business who are customer facing but don't necessarily have sustainability background. So I get wheeled out if people want to talk about greenhouse gases, but really making sure that the importance of everybody being able to talk about it and understanding that, and trying to find better ways in which we do that.
Brilliant. I think we are running perfectly on time, and that's all the time we have for questions today. I just want to say thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. Up next, we have Poppy London from HP, and she's going to be sharing HP's vision and sustainable impact strategy, as well as highlighting how HP work in close partnership to help customers achieve sustainability goals. That's going to be at 1:55. So we've got a short break, and then we'll see you back here shortly. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joe.